The little girl stood barefoot in the snow, her arms wrapped around her unconscious mother, screaming at the winter sky. "Please, somebody, she's dying." No one in the wagon train looked back. They had already voted 2 mouths too many, 2 souls not worth saving. That's when Jake McAllister rode past. He wasn't looking for redemption. He wasn't looking for anything at all. But when that child's eyes met his, something he thought had died 4 years ago started breathing again. If you believe love can be found in the coldest places, subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We want to see how far this tale travels. The screaming started just past Miller's Ridge. Jake McAllister pulled his horse to a stop, breath fogging in the bitter cold. He'd heard plenty of sounds in the Colorado wilderness: wolves, mountain lions, the death rattle of cattle freezing where they stood. But this sound was different. This was a child. He turned his horse toward the wind. The trail ahead was empty, nothing but white stretching to the gray horizon. January had come hard this year, harder than any winter Jake could remember. Snow piled waist-high in the valleys, and the temperature hadn't climbed above freezing in 3 weeks. He should have kept riding. Should have made it back to his ranch before the next storm rolled in. The sky was already darkening, clouds gathering like bruises over the mountains. But the screaming didn't stop. Jake kicked his horse forward. He found them a quarter-mile off the main trail in a shallow gully that offered no protection from the wind. A wagon sat abandoned nearby, one wheel broken, the canvas top torn and flapping. No horses, no supplies. Just snow and silence and that terrible, desperate crying. The child couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She wore a thin cotton dress, no coat, no shoes. Her bare feet were buried in the snow up to her ankles, her skin so pale it was almost blue. She knelt over a woman's body, shaking her, screaming at her, begging her to wake up. "Mama, Mama, please! You gotta wake up! Please, Mama, please!" Jake dismounted before he knew he was moving. The woman lay face down in the snow, her dark hair spread around her like spilled ink. She wore a dress that might have been pretty once, yellow cotton with small flowers, but now it was torn, stained, frozen stiff in places. Her wrists were raw, the skin rubbed bloody. Rope marks. Jake had seen those marks before. He knelt beside the child, and she spun toward him, wild-eyed, terrified. She threw herself between him and her mother, arms spread wide, tiny body trembling so hard her teeth chattered. "Don't touch her!" she screamed. "Don't you touch my mama!" Jake raised his hand slowly. "Easy now, easy. I ain't gonna hurt her." That's what they said. That's what they all said. The child's voice cracked, tears freezing on her cheeks before they could fall. Her lips were purple. Her fingers curled into fists, so tight the knuckles had gone white. Jake stayed very still. "Who said that, little one? Who hurt your mama?" "The wagon people. They said we ate too much. They said Mama was sick, and we'd make everyone sick. They threw us out. They threw us out in the snow, and Mama tried to walk, and she fell, and she won't wake up. She won't wake up." The child collapsed against her mother's body, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. Jake watched her tiny shoulders shake, watched her bare feet turn from white to gray, and something inside him cracked open. 4 years since he'd felt anything but numbness. 4 years since the fire took Sarah and Emma, since he'd buried what was left of them in the hard Montana earth and walked away from everything he'd ever been. He'd promised himself he wouldn't feel again, promised himself he wouldn't care. But this child, this frozen, desperate, brave little child, she was looking at him the way Emma used to look at him, like he could fix anything, like he was strong enough to hold back the whole world. He wasn't. He'd proven that. But God help him, he couldn't walk away. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The girl hiccuped, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Lily. Lily. That's a pretty name." Jake shifted closer, moving slow, the way he'd approach a spooked horse. "My name's Jake. I got a ranch not far from here. Warm fire, hot food. You think maybe you and your mama might like to come with me?" Lily's eyes narrowed. Even frozen half to death, she wasn't stupid. Why? Why what? Why would you help us? Nobody helps us. Nobody ever helps us. The words hit Jake like a fist to the chest. 5 years old, and she'd already learned that lesson. 5 years old, and she'd already given up on humanity. He knew exactly how that felt. "I reckon," he said slowly, "because somebody should." Lily stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at her mother, at the blue lips and the still chest, and her face crumpled. "She's so cold. I tried to keep her warm. I put my hands on her face and I breathed on her fingers, like she does for me when I'm cold. But she won't. Hey." Jake reached out, hesitated, then gently touched the child's shoulder. She flinched, but didn't pull away. "Let me see her. Okay, I promise I ain't gonna hurt her. I just want to help." Lily bit her lips so hard it bled. Then slowly she moved aside. Jake pressed 2 fingers to the woman's neck. For a horrible moment, he felt nothing. Then there, faint, thready. But there. "She's alive," he said. Lily let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a laugh. "She is. She's alive. Mama's alive." Barely. Jake was already pulling off his coat, his heavy wool coat that Sarah had sewn for him the winter before she died. He wrapped it around the woman's shoulders, then lifted her from the snow. She weighed almost nothing. "We gotta move. Now. You understand, if we don't get her warm, she ain't gonna make it." "I can walk," Lily said immediately. "I can walk real fast. I won't slow you down, I promise. Please don't leave me. Please." "I ain't leaving you." Jake settled the woman across his saddle, then turned back to the child. "Come here." Lily hesitated. "Lily, come here." She took 1 step toward him, then another. When she was close enough, Jake scooped her up with his free arm and set her on the horse in front of her mother. Then he grabbed the reins and started walking. The wind was picking up. Snow swirled around them, thick and blinding. Jake could barely see 10 feet ahead, but he knew this land. He'd ridden every inch of it in the 4 years since he'd come here to disappear. His ranch was 3 miles east. 3 miles through a blizzard, leading a horse carrying a dying woman and a frozen child. He'd faced worse odds. "Mr. Jake." Lily's voice was small, muffled by the wind. "Yeah? Is Mama gonna die?" Jake kept walking, 1 foot in front of the other. "Not if I can help it." "The wagon people said she was already dead. They said she had the wasting sickness and she'd die anyway, so there was no point wasting food on her. They said I could stay if I wanted, but I'd have to leave Mama behind." Jake's jaw tightened. "I told them no." Lily continued, her voice steadier now. "I told them I'd rather die with Mama than live without her, so they threw us both out. The man with the red beard, he laughed. He said we wouldn't last an hour." "How long ago was that?" "I don't know. A long time. The sun was up when they left us." Jake looked at the sky. The sun had set at least 2 hours ago. This child had been out here barefoot in a blizzard for over 4 hours, keeping her mother alive through sheer force of will. He'd seen grown men give up faster than that. "You did good, Lily. You did real good." "I just wanted Mama to be okay." "I know." They walked in silence for a while. The snow fell harder, the wind howled louder, but Jake kept moving. His fingers were numb. His feet had stopped hurting, which meant they'd probably started freezing. But the ranch was close now. He could see the faint glow of the lantern he'd left burning in the window. "Mr. Jake?" "Yeah." "Are you a good man?" Jake almost laughed. Almost. "No, little one. I ain't." "Then why are you helping us?" He didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, and he just wasn't ready to say it out loud. So he kept walking, and the snow kept falling, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, A light waited. The cabin was small, built for one man who didn't want company. But it was warm, and it was dry, and right now, that was all that mattered. Jake carried the woman inside first, laying her on the bed by the fire. Lily followed close behind her eyes, darting around the room like a cornered animal, looking for escape routes. "Sit by the fire," Jake ordered. "Don't move." He didn't wait for her to obey. He was already stripping the frozen clothes off the woman, replacing them with dry blankets, piling quilts on top of her until she was buried in warmth. Her skin was ice cold, her lips still blue, but her chest was rising and falling. Shallow. Weak. But rising. "Is she gonna be okay?" Lily had ignored his instruction. She stood right beside him, watching everything he did. Her small hands clenched at her sides. "Don't know yet," Jake said honestly. "She's been out in the cold a long time. Might take a while for her to wake up. Might—" He stopped himself. "Might not wake up at all. We just gotta wait and see." "I can help. Tell me what to do. I can help." Jake looked at the child. Really looked at her for the first time since they'd gotten inside. She was tiny, probably small for her age, with tangled black hair and enormous brown eyes that seemed too old for her face. Her dress was soaked through. Her feet were cracked and bleeding, and she was shivering so hard she could barely stand. But she wasn't crying. Wasn't complaining. She just wanted to help her mother. Something twisted in Jake's chest. "First thing you're gonna do," he said gruffly, "is get warm yourself. Ain't no use to your mama if you freeze to death." But no arguments. He grabbed a blanket from the chair and wrapped it around her shoulders, then lifted her. She weighed nothing, nothing at all, and set her in the rocking chair by the fire. "You stay there. You get warm. Then we'll talk about helping." Lily opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Her eyes drifted to her mother on the bed. "You promise you'll take care of her?" "I promise." "Cross your heart." Jake hesitated. He hadn't crossed his heart since Emma was alive. It had been their thing, their special promise, the one that could never be broken. "Cross my heart," he said. Lily nodded once, then curled up in the chair, pulling the blanket tight around her. Within minutes her eyes were closed. Jake stood there for a long moment watching her sleep. Then he turned back to the woman on the bed. Up close, she was younger than he'd first thought. Late 20s, maybe. Her face was gaunt cheekbones sharp beneath skin that had gone sallow, but there was something there. Strength, maybe. Stubbornness. The kind of beauty that came from surviving things that should have killed you. He noticed the scars on her wrists again. Not just rope burns. Older marks beneath them, white and faded. She'd been tied up before. More than once. He noticed the bruise on her jaw yellowing at the edges. A week old at least. He noticed the way her hands were curled into fists, even unconscious. Like she was ready to fight. What the hell had happened to this woman? Jake pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down. He had a long night ahead of him. Ted. The fire crackled. The wind howled. And sometime around midnight, the woman opened her eyes. She came up swinging. Jake caught her wrist before her fist connected with his jaw. She screamed a raw animal sound and thrashed against him, kicking, biting, fighting like her life depended on it. "Hey, hey, easy, you're safe." She wasn't listening. Her eyes were wild, unseeing, trapped in some nightmare he couldn't follow. She clawed at his arms, his face drawing blood, and Jake let her. He didn't fight back. He just held her wrists, kept her from hurting herself, and waited. "Lily!" she screamed. "Where's Lily? What did you do with her? Where's my daughter?" "Mama!" The small voice cut through the chaos. Lily scrambled out of the rocking chair and threw herself onto the bed, wrapping her arms around her mother's neck. "Mama, I'm here. I'm here. It's okay, Mama. It's okay." The woman froze. Her wild eyes focused on the child in her arms, and something in her face shattered. She grabbed Lily and held her so tight Jake was afraid she might crush her. Lily, oh God, Lily, you're alive. You're alive. I'm okay, Mama. The man saved us. He carried us through the snow and brought us to his house and made a fire, and— What man? The woman's head snapped up. Her eyes found Jake, and they went hard. Cold. Dangerous. Who are you? She demanded. What do you want? Jake raised his hands slowly, showing his palms. Name's Jake McAllister. I found you and your daughter in the snow about 5 hours ago. Brought you here to my ranch. You were half frozen, ma'am. Another hour out there, and you both would have died. Why? Why what? Why did you save us? Her voice cracked. What do you want in return? Jake understood then. The rope marks, the bruises, the way she'd come up fighting. This woman had learned that nothing in life was free, that every kindness came with a price. He leaned back in his chair. I don't want nothing. Liar. Mama. Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mama, he's nice. He gave me a blanket and he crossed his heart. He'd take care of you, and he didn't even yell when I didn't stay in the chair like he told me to. The woman looked down at her daughter. Something in her expression shifted, not softening exactly, but considering. He crossed his heart. Lily nodded solemnly. The woman's eyes returned to Jake. They were brown, he noticed. Dark brown with flecks of gold like autumn leaves floating in whiskey. Beautiful eyes even filled with suspicion. What's your game, Mr. McAllister? Ain't got one. Everyone's got a game. Then I reckon mine is minding my own business and trying to survive the winter. Jake stood up slowly. There's soup on the stove, bread in the box. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. When the storm breaks, I can take you to the nearest town if that's what you want. He walked toward the door. Wait. He stopped. That's it. The woman's voice was sharp with disbelief. You save 2 strangers from a blizzard, bring them to your home, give them your bed, and you don't want anything. Jake turned back. He looked at her, this fierce, damaged, beautiful woman, and then at the child curled against her side, finally safe, finally warm. I had a daughter once, he said quietly. She was about Lily's age when she died. Fire took her. Took my wife, too. He paused. I couldn't save them. Couldn't do a damn thing but watch. The woman's expression flickered. Something that might have been recognition, might have been pain. So, no ma'am. I don't want nothing from you. I just— His voice caught. He cleared his throat. I just didn't want to watch another little girl die in front of me, that's all. He turned away before she could respond and walked out into the cold. The barn was freezing, but Jake barely noticed. He sat on a hay bale, head in his hands, and tried to remember how to breathe. 4 years. 4 years of nothing. 4 years of waking up alone, working alone, going to bed alone. 4 years of building walls so high and so thick that nothing could get through. And then one screaming child in a snowstorm, and all those walls came crumbling down. He could still hear Emma's voice, could still see her face the way it had looked that last morning, smeared with jam from breakfast, grinning at him as he headed out to check the cattle. Bye, Papa, love you. Love you too, sweetheart. Those were the last words he ever said to her. By the time he smelled the smoke and rode back, the house was an inferno. Sarah was at the window flames behind her, screaming his name. Emma was already gone. He'd tried to get to them. Tried until his horse threw him, until the roof collapsed, until there was nothing left to save. The scars on his hands, he'd never told anyone how he got them. Never told anyone that he'd tried to dig through burning rubble with his bare hands, screaming his daughter's name until his voice gave out. He hadn't cried at the funeral, hadn't cried since. Some things went too deep for tears. But sitting in that cold barn listening to the wind howl, Jake McAllister finally let himself feel it. All of it. The grief he'd buried. The guilt he'd carried. The terrible, aching loneliness of being the one who survived. And something else. Something he hadn't expected. Hope. It was small, barely a flicker. But it was there. And it terrified him more than anything had in 4 years. Mal. When Jake came back inside an hour later, the fire had burned low. Lily was asleep on the bed, curled up like a kitten, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd found her. The woman was sitting up watching him. "You didn't have to sleep in the barn," she said. "Figured you'd rest better without a strange man in the house." She considered that, nodded once. "Thank you." "Yes, ma'am." "Clara." Jake blinked. "What?" "My name. It's Clara. Clara Brennan." She hesitated, then added, "I suppose if you're going to save my life, you ought to know my name." Clara. He tested it on his tongue. It fit her strong and simple and lovely. "That's a nice name." "It was my grandmother's." Clara looked down at her hands at the rope burns on her wrists. "Mr. McAllister." "Jake." "Jake." She took a breath. "I'm sorry. For attacking you earlier. I thought—" She stopped. Started again. "I've learned that most men who offer help aren't really offering help. They're offering a transaction." "I ain't most men." "No." Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was something other than suspicion in them. "I'm starting to see that." The fire popped. Outside, the wind died down to a whisper. "Get some sleep, Clara," Jake said. "We can talk in the morning." She nodded, but she didn't lie down. She just sat there watching him as he settled into the rocking chair and closed his eyes. The last thing Jake heard before he drifted off was Clara's voice, soft as snowfall. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." He didn't answer. But somewhere in the darkness, in the cold cabin, in the middle of nowhere, a man who'd given up on everything felt something warm bloom in his chest. And for the first time in 4 years, Jake McAllister didn't dream of fire. Morning came slow and gray. Jake woke to the smell of coffee, real coffee. Not the bitter sludge he usually made, and the sound of voices. "No, Lily, you have to stir it gentle. Like this. See? Like this, Mama. Perfect. You're a natural." He opened his eyes. Clara stood at the stove, wrapped in one of his old shirts, her dark hair pulled back from her face. Lily stood beside her on a wooden crate, stirring something in a pot with intense concentration. They looked right, like they belonged here. The thought hit Jake like a punch to the gut. "You're awake." Clara had noticed him. She didn't smile. He got the feeling smiling didn't come easy to her, but something in her expression softened. "Coffee's ready." Lily insisted on making breakfast. "I'm making porridge," Lily announced proudly. "Mama taught me. She says I'm going to be the best cook in all of Colorado." "I don't doubt it," Jake said, his voice rough with sleep. He pushed himself out of the chair, every muscle aching from the cold ride and the night in the barn. Clara handed him a cup of coffee without being asked, their fingers brushing for just a moment. She pulled away quickly, but not before he saw the flush creep up her cheeks. "How are you feeling?" Jake asked. "You were in pretty bad shape last night." "Better. Weak, but better." Clara turned back to the stove, hiding her face. "I don't remember much after they threw us out of the wagon. Lily says I collapsed and she—" Her voice broke. "She stayed with you," Jake said. "Kept you warm best she could. Wouldn't leave you. Not for anything." Clara's shoulders shook. When she turned around, her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. This woman didn't cry. He could tell. She'd forgotten how. "She's all I have," Clara whispered. "Everything else, my home, my family, my husband, all gone. Lily is all I have left." "Your husband?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Dead. 3 months ago. Gambling debts. The men he owed money to, they—" She stopped. "It doesn't matter. What matters is we got away. We joined that wagon train heading west, thought we could start over. But the journey was hard, and I got sick, and they decided we weren't worth the trouble." So they threw you out. Like garbage. Her voice was flat. In the middle of a blizzard, with a 5-year-old child. Jake's hands curled into fists. If he ever met the red-bearded man Lily had mentioned, there was going to be a reckoning. "You're safe now," he said. "Both of you." Clara looked at him. Really looked, searching his face for something. Lies, maybe. Hidden motives. Whatever darkness she expected to find. Whatever she saw, it surprised her. "Why don't I believe you're real?" she murmured. "Men like you don't exist. I learned that a long time ago." "Maybe you learned wrong." The words hung between them. Clara opened her mouth to respond. "Porridge is ready." Lily's triumphant announcement shattered the moment. "Everybody sit down, I made breakfast." Clara turned away, but not before Jake saw it. The ghost of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It was the most beautiful thing he'd seen in 4 years. They ate in near silence. Lily chattered enough for all three of them, filling the cabin with stories about the wagon train, about the horses she'd seen, about how she wanted a puppy someday, a big fluffy one with floppy ears. Jake listened. He'd forgotten what it was like having voices in this cabin. Having life. "Mr. Jake," Lily asked, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. "Yeah. Do you have any animals besides your horse?" "Got some cattle, chickens, a barn cat named Whiskey." Lily giggled. "That's a silly name for a cat." She earned it. Found her half drowned in a whiskey barrel behind the saloon in town. Figured the name fit. "Can I meet her?" Jake glanced at Clara. She gave a small nod. "Sure. After breakfast I'll introduce you." Lily beamed. And something in Jake's chest cracked open a little wider. After breakfast, Clara insisted on washing the dishes. Jake didn't argue. He'd learned pretty quick that arguing with Clara Brennan was a losing battle. So he took Lily out to the barn instead, letting her pet the horses and chase the chickens and squeal with delight when Whiskey the cat rubbed against her ankles. For a few hours, he almost forgot why they were here. Almost forgot that this wasn't real, that they were just strangers brought together by a storm, and as soon as the roads cleared, they'd be gone. The thought shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. When they came back inside, Clara was standing by the window, looking out at the snow. "It's stopping," she said quietly. "The storm. It's almost over." Jake nodded. "Should be clear by tomorrow. I can hitch up the wagon, take you to town. There's a boarding house there. Mrs. Patterson runs it. She's good people. She'll look after you until you figure out what comes next." Clara didn't turn around. "And if we don't have money for a boarding house, I'll cover it." Now she turned. "Why?" "Already told you. I don't want nothing." "That's not an answer." Jake sighed. He walked over to the fireplace, picked up the poker and stirred the embers. Anything to keep his hands busy. "When the fire took my family," he said slowly, "I wanted to die. Spent 6 months trying to drink myself into the grave. Didn't eat, didn't sleep, just existed. Then one day I woke up and realized that dying wasn't going to bring them back. All it was going to do was waste the years I had left." He set the poker down. "So I came here, built this place with my own hands. Figured if I couldn't have the life I wanted, I'd at least survive the one I got." Clara was silent for a long moment. Then softly, "That sounds lonely." "It is." Jake finally looked at her. "But lonely is safe. Lonely don't hurt." "Is that what you want, safe?" "It was. Until yesterday." The words hung in the air between them. Clara's breath caught. "Jake, I ain't asking for nothing," he said quickly. "I know you got no reason to trust me or any man. I know you're gonna leave as soon as you can, and that's fine. That's your right. But I want you to know." He paused, searching for the right words. "You and Lily, you're welcome here. For as long as you need. No strings. No expectations. Just a roof. And a fire. And someone who gives a damn whether you live or die." Clara stared at him. Her eyes were shining, But she still wasn't crying, still holding it together the way she'd probably been holding it together her whole damn life. "You barely know us," she whispered. "I know enough." "What if I'm not who you think I am? What if I'm broken, damaged? What if I hurt you?" Jake smiled. It felt strange on his face, like a muscle he'd forgotten how to use. "Then I reckon we'll be two broken people together. Can't be much worse than being one broken person alone." Clara laughed. It was short, surprised, almost painful, like she'd forgotten she could make that sound. "You're insane," she said. "Probably. I don't trust you. I know. I might never trust you. That's okay." She shook her head, but she was almost smiling. "What am I supposed to do with you, Jake McAllister?" "Stay," he said simply. "Just stay." Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The sun was breaking through the clouds, painting the world in shades of white and gold. And in a small cabin in the Colorado wilderness, two broken people stood on opposite sides of a room, learning how to breathe again. Clara didn't answer, not with words. But she didn't walk away either, and for now, that was enough. 3 days passed and Clara didn't leave. She told herself it was because Lily needed rest. Told herself the roads were still too dangerous, the snow too deep. Told herself 100 different lies because the truth was too terrifying to admit. She didn't want to go. Every morning she woke before dawn, habit carved into her bones from years of survival. Every morning she expected to find the cabin empty. Expected Jake to have vanished in the night like every other man who'd ever promised her safety. Every morning he was there, stirring the fire, brewing coffee, moving quiet so he wouldn't wake them. It made her angry. It made her suspicious. It made her feel things she'd sworn never to feel again. On the 4th morning she found him outside chopping wood. The sun had barely risen, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, and Jake worked with the steady rhythm of a man who'd done this 1,000 times before. His breath fogged in the cold air. His shoulders moved beneath his worn wool shirt muscles, rolling with each swing of the axe. Clara watched him from the doorway, and something twisted in her chest. "You're staring." She jumped. Jake hadn't turned around, hadn't stopped chopping, but somehow he knew she was there. "I wasn't staring," she said quickly. "I was observing." "Uh-huh." He split another log, the crack of wood echoing across the clearing. "There's coffee on the stove if you want it." "I know, I made it." That made him pause. He turned axe resting against his shoulder, one eyebrow raised. "You made coffee?" "You looked cold. I figured you could use something hot when you came in." Clara crossed her arms, defensive. "It's not a big deal." "Never said it was." "Good. Good." They stood there, breath fogging between them, neither willing to look away first. Finally, Jake shook his head and turned back to the woodpile. Lily still sleeping. Like the dead. Clara winced at her own words. "Sorry. I didn't mean—" "It's fine." Jake's voice was even. "She's been through a lot. Sleep's good for her." "She's been through more than any child should." Clara moved closer, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Before the wagon train, before all of this, things weren't good. Her father, he—" She stopped. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to you." "A lot of things matter to me. Doesn't mean I talk about them." Jake set down the axe. He turned to face her fully, and Clara was struck again by his eyes. Gray-blue like storm clouds over the mountains. Sad eyes, eyes that had seen too much. "My wife used to say that carrying pain alone just makes it heavier," he said quietly. "Said that sharing it don't make it disappear, but it makes it easier to bear." "Your wife sounds like a wise woman." She was. A muscle twitched in Jake's jaw. "Smartest person I ever knew. I spent 5 years trying to be worthy of her, and I still fell short." "What happened to the fire, I mean? How did it start?" The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. She expected him to shut down, to walk away, to tell her it was none of her business. That's what she would have done. Instead, Jake took a long breath and sat down on the chopping block. "Raiders," he said. "We had a ranch up in Montana. Small place, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Sarah and I built it together after we got married. Emma was born there." His voice caught on his daughter's name. "She used to help me feed the chickens every morning. Had this little pink dress she insisted on wearing even when it got too small for her. Drove Sarah crazy, but I couldn't say no to that face." Clara lowered herself onto a nearby stump, drawn in despite herself. "The raiders came in the night," Jake continued. "I was out checking on the cattle, heard the gunshots, saw the flames. By the time I got there—" He stopped, swallowed hard. Sarah was at the window. She was screaming my name. And Emma. Emma was already— "Stop!" Clara's voice was sharper than she intended. "You don't have to. I tried to get to them, tried to break down the door, climb through the windows, anything. But the fire was too hot, too fast. The roof collapsed before I could—" Jake looked down at his hands, at the faded burn scars across his palms. "I dug through the rubble for hours, bare hands, looking for them, hoping maybe they'd found a way out. Maybe they were hiding somewhere, maybe—" He broke off. The silence stretched between them, heavy as snowfall. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. "I shouldn't have asked." "No." Jake raised his head. "It's all right. I ain't told that story to anyone in 4 years. Maybe it's time. Why me?" The question hung in the air. Jake held her gaze for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "Because you understand," he said finally. "Don't you? You know what it's like to lose everything and still have to keep breathing." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, wanted to keep her walls up, wanted to stay safe behind the armor she'd spent years building. But something about this man, this quiet, broken, stubborn man, made her want to tell the truth. "My husband sold me." The words came out flat, emotionless, like she was reading from a newspaper. It was the only way she could say them. 3 months before he died, he ran up gambling debts he couldn't pay. The men he owed, they came to collect. And Thomas, my husband, he offered them a trade. Clara's hands curled into fists in her lap. "Me. He offered them me." Jake went very still. "They kept me in a basement for 2 weeks. Did things I can't—" She shook her head. "Lily was with Thomas's sister. They didn't know about her, thank God. When Thomas was killed in a card game, the debt was considered settled. They let me go." "Clara." "I'm not finished." She forced herself to keep talking to get it all out before she lost her nerve. "I took Lily, and I ran. Spent everything I had to get us on that wagon train heading west. I thought if we could just get far enough away, start over somewhere new, we could forget. We could heal." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Turns out you can't outrun your past. It just follows you and waits for the right moment to drag you back down." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, walked over to where she sat, and did something that made Clara's breath catch in her throat. He knelt in front of her. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hands in his. His grip was gentle, so gentle, like he was holding something precious. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and fierce. "What happened to you that wasn't your fault? None of it. Your husband, those men, the wagon train, none of them deserved you. None of them saw what you really are. And what's that? Strong." Jake's eyes held hers. Brave. A fighter. A mother who would walk through a blizzard barefoot to keep her daughter safe. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You ain't broken, Clara. You're just scarred. Like me. And scars, they ain't weakness. They're proof you survived." Clara stared at him. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever looked at her the way Jake was looking at her now. Not with pity, not with judgment, but with something that looked almost like awe. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know enough. I might hurt you." "You might. I can't promise anything. I ain't asking you to." She should have pulled away. should have retreated behind her walls, kept herself safe, protected what was left of her shattered heart. Instead, she squeezed his hands back. "You're a fool, Jake McAllister. Been told that before. I'm difficult and stubborn, and I have nightmares that wake me up screaming. So do I. I don't know how to trust anymore. Then we'll figure it out together." Clara felt something crack inside her. Not break, she'd been broken too many times. This was different. This felt like ice melting, like the first thaw of spring after a long, hard winter. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why do you care so much?" Jake was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because for 4 years I've been walking around like a dead man, going through the motions, waiting to die without having the courage to actually do it." He paused. "And then I found you and Lily in that snow, and for the first time since the fire, I felt something. Something that wasn't grief or guilt or anger." "What did you feel?" "Purpose." His eyes shone. "Like maybe God or fate or whatever you want to call it gave me a second chance. Like maybe I wasn't put on this earth just to suffer. Maybe I was put here to help someone, to protect someone, to—" He trailed off. "To what?" "To love again." The words came out barely louder than a whisper. "Even if it scares the hell out of me." Clara's heart pounded against her ribs. This was too fast. Too much. She barely knew this man, and here he was kneeling in the snow, talking about love, like it was something real, something possible, something that wouldn't eventually destroy them both. But when she looked into his eyes, those sad, honest, hopeful eyes, she couldn't find a single lie. "Mama." The small voice shattered the moment. Clara yanked her hands back, turning to find Lily standing in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Mama, I'm hungry." Clara stood quickly, brushing snow from her skirt. "I'll make breakfast, sweetheart. Go back inside where it's warm." "Is Mr. Jake okay? Why is he sitting in the snow?" Jake pushed himself to his feet, wincing slightly. "I'm fine, little one. Just having a talk with your mama." "Oh." Lily considered this. "Can I have pancakes?" "We don't have the ingredients for—" Clara started. "I got flour and eggs," Jake interrupted. "And some maple syrup I traded for last fall. Been saving it for a special occasion." Lily's face lit up. "Really, pancakes with syrup?" "If your mama says it's okay." Both of them turned to Clara, waiting. Jake's expression was carefully neutral, but Clara could see the hope hiding beneath it. And Lily. Lily was practically vibrating with excitement, more animated than she'd been since before the wagon train. Clara sighed. "Fine, pancakes." Lily squealed and ran back into the cabin. Jake started to follow, then paused beside Clara. "For what it's worth," he said quietly. "I meant every word." He walked inside before she could respond. Clara stood alone in the cold morning air, heart racing, mind spinning, feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. The smart thing would be to step back. The safe thing would be to take Lily and leave as soon as the roads cleared, before she got any more attached, before she started believing in something that couldn't possibly be real. But for the first time in years, Clara didn't want to be smart. She didn't want to be safe. She wanted to jump. Inside the cabin, she could hear Lily chattering away, asking Jake 1,000 questions about pancakes and horses, and whether Whiskey the cat would like maple syrup. She could hear Jake's low, patient voice answering each one, never dismissive, never annoyed. Clara closed her eyes and let herself imagine just for a moment what it would be like to stay. To wake up every morning in this cabin to watch Lily grow up with horses and chickens and a cat named Whiskey. To let someone take care of her for once, instead of always fighting alone. To be loved. The thought was terrifying. But beneath the terror, there was something else. Something warm and fragile and dangerously close to hope. Clara opened her eyes and walked inside. The next week passed in a blur of small moments that stitched themselves together into something Clara didn't have a name for. Mornings began with coffee and quiet conversations, Jake and Clara talking in hushed tones while Lily slept. He told her about his childhood in Tennessee, about his father who drank too much, and his mother who prayed too hard. She told him about growing up in Arizona, about her Mexican grandmother who taught her to cook, and her Irish father who taught her to read. They traded stories like currency, each revelation buying a little more trust, a little more intimacy. Clara found herself saying things she'd never told anyone. Not Thomas, not her sister, not even the priest she'd confessed to after her husband's death. Jake listened. That was the thing about him. He didn't try to fix her problems or minimize her pain. He just listened, nodding in all the right places, asking questions that showed he actually cared about the answers. It was disorienting. It was wonderful. It was absolutely terrifying. Afternoons belonged to Lily. Jake taught her to ride his gentlest horse, a dappled gray mare named Biscuit. He showed her how to collect eggs without getting pecked, how to milk the cow without getting kicked, how to whistle loud enough to call the barn cat from across the field. Clara watched them together, and something in her chest ached with a sweetness she'd forgotten existed. This was what a father was supposed to look like. This was what safety felt like. She'd almost given up believing such things existed. Evenings were for the three of them crowded around the small table, eating whatever Clara had managed to cook on the old iron stove. Jake declared her cornbread the best he'd ever tasted, and even though Clara knew he was exaggerating, she felt a flush of pride that lasted for hours. After dinner, they'd sit by the fire. Jake would whittle he was making something for Lily, though he wouldn't say what while Clara mended clothes or read aloud from the small collection of books Jake kept on a shelf by the window. Lily would curl up between them, fighting sleep until her eyes finally surrendered. Those were the moments Clara held closest. The quiet moments. The peaceful moments. The moments that felt like home. On the 8th night, Clara woke to find Jake gone. She sat up, heart-pounding old fears clawing at her throat. He'd left. Of course he'd left. They all left eventually, didn't they? Every man she'd ever trusted had walked away, or worse, and she'd been a fool to think Jake would be different. Then she heard it. A low sound coming from outside the cabin. Not words, not exactly. More like singing. Clara wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and crept to the door. Jake stood in the snow face, tilted toward the sky, singing something soft and sad in a language she didn't recognize. His voice was rough, untrained, but there was a beauty to it that made Clara's breath catch. The melody rose and fell like waves, like grief, like prayer. She didn't mean to speak. The word just slipped out. Jake. He turned. In the moonlight, she could see the tears on his cheeks. Sorry, he said hoarsely. Didn't mean to wake you. What were you singing? Old Cherokee lullaby. My mother taught it to me when I was small. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I used to sing it to Emma, every night before bed. She said it helped her sleep. Clara walked toward him, snow crunching beneath her bare feet. You should go back inside, Jake said. It's freezing out here. So should you. I will. Just needed a minute. Does it help, the singing? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Some nights. Other nights nothing helps. Other nights I just have to sit with it until morning. Clara reached out and took his hand. His fingers were ice cold, trembling slightly. You don't have to sit with it alone, she said. Jake looked at her. Something shifted in his expression, something raw and vulnerable and terribly young. I don't know how to do this, Clara, any of this. I've been alone so long I forgot how to be anything else. Then we'll figure it out together. She was echoing his own words back to him, and from the way his breath caught, he knew it. You deserve better than me, he whispered. Maybe, but you're what I want. The words hung in the frozen air between them. Clara hadn't meant to say them, hadn't meant to admit even to herself that she'd started wanting things again. But there they were, undeniable and true. Jake's hand tightened around hers. If I kiss you right now, he said slowly, is that okay? Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Yes. He leaned in slow and careful, giving her every chance to pull away. His lips brushed hers, soft as snowfall, tentative as a question. She answered by kissing him back. It wasn't passionate, it wasn't desperate. It was gentle and sad and full of something that felt like hope, like two broken people finding something worth holding on to in the wreckage of their lives. When they finally pulled apart, Jake rested his forehead against hers. I'm scared, he admitted. So am I. I might mess this up. You might. You're still willing to try? Clara thought about all the reasons she shouldn't, all the ways this could end badly, all the pain she'd already survived and wasn't sure she could survive again. Then she thought about Lily sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, about mornings full of coffee and conversation, about the way Jake looked at her like she was something worth protecting. Yes, she said. I'm willing to try. Jake smiled. It transformed his whole face, chasing away the shadows, making him look younger, lighter, almost happy. Then let's go inside before we freeze to death. Can't start a new life if we're dead. Clara laughed, the sound startling them both. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed. Hand in hand, they walked back into the cabin, back to the warmth, back to whatever came next. The fire had burned low, but it was still glowing, still alive, just like them. 2 weeks of peace. 2 weeks of learning each other's rhythms, of shared meals and quiet laughter and stolen glances across the cabin. 2 weeks that felt like a lifetime, and not nearly enough. Clara should have known it couldn't last. The riders came at noon on a Tuesday, 3 of them cutting dark shapes against the white horizon. Jake saw them first, his whole body going rigid as he stood at the window. Clara. Something in his voice made her blood run cold. She'd heard that tone before in the moments before everything fell apart. Take Lily to the root cellar. Now. Jake, what? Now, Clara. She didn't argue. She grabbed Lily from where she sat playing with whiskey by the fire and moved toward the back of the cabin. Mama, what's wrong? Lily's voice was high with fear. Why do we have to hide? Shh, baby, it's okay. We're just going to play a game, all right, a quiet game. I don't like this game. I know, sweetheart, I know. Clara lifted the trapdoor to the root cellar and lowered Lily into the darkness. The girl clung to her small fingers, digging into Clara's arms. Don't leave me, Mama. Please don't leave me. I'm not going anywhere. Clara climbed down after her, pulling the trapdoor closed above them. I'm right here. I'm always going to be right here. Through the floorboards, she heard the front door open, heard Jake's boots on the porch, heard voices she didn't recognize, low and dangerous. Well, well, Jake McAllister, been a long time. Not long enough, Silas. Clara's heart stopped. Silas. She knew that name. Knew it the way you know your worst nightmares, the ones that chase you even when you're awake. Silas Crawford. The man who'd bought her from Thomas. The man who'd kept her in that basement for 2 weeks, who'd done things to her that still made her wake up screaming. The man who never let his property go. I hear you've been keeping something that belongs to me, Silas said, his voice carrying clear through the cabin walls. Pretty little thing. Dark hair. Mexican eyes. Ring any bells? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb with me, McAllister. One of my boys spotted her in town last week. Said she was buying supplies at the general store, big as life. Said there was a kid with her, too. A pause. Now, I don't rightly care about the kid. But that woman, she cost me a considerable sum, and I intend to collect on my investment. She ain't here. Is that so? Then you won't mind if we take a look around. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth, stifling the sob that threatened to escape. Lily trembled against her, silent but shaking, and Clara pulled her closer, trying to shield her from the horror unfolding above their heads. You ain't setting foot in my house. Now see, that's where you're wrong. Silas's voice dripped with false pleasantry. I've got 3 guns to your 1. I've got the law in my pocket. Sheriff owes me more money than he'll ever be able to pay, and I've got all the time in the world. A long pause. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to step aside and my boys are going to search this cabin. If the woman's not here, we'll apologize for the inconvenience and be on our way. But if she is, then you and I are going to have a very different kind of conversation. The silence stretched so long that Clara thought she might go mad from it. Then Jake spoke, his voice low and steady. You should know something, Silas. What's that? I buried my wife and daughter 4 years ago. Since then, I've been hoping someone would give me a reason to die. A beat. Thank you for finally giving me one. The gunshot exploded through the cabin like thunder. Clara screamed before she could stop herself, the sound tearing from her throat as she heard bodies hitting the porch, as she heard shouting and cursing, and the deafening roar of more gunfire. Mama! Lily shrieked, clapping her hands over her ears. Mama, what's happening? Stay down, baby! Stay down and don't move! Clara pressed Lily into the corner of the cellar and covered her with her own body, shielding her from whatever came next. Above them, the chaos continued, boots thundering across the floor, furniture crashing, glass shattering. Then silence. Terrible, absolute silence. Clara waited, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had lost all meaning. Finally, the trapdoor opened. Light flooded in, blinding after the darkness. Clara squinted up, ready to fight, ready to die, ready to do whatever it took to protect her daughter. Jake's face appeared above them, pale and drawn blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. It's over, he said. They're gone. Clara burst into tears. Jake helped them out of the cellar, his movements slow and careful. Clara saw the way he favored his left side, saw the dark stain spreading across his shirt. You're hurt. It's nothing. Jake, I said it's nothing. His voice was harsher than she'd ever heard it. We need to move. Now. Silas got away, and he'll be back with more men. Got away, but I shot 2 of them, but Silas ran before I could get a clear shot. Jake's jaw tightened. Coward always was better at letting others do his dirty work. Clara's mind raced. Where do we go if he owns the sheriff? I know a place. Old mining cabin up in the mountains. Nobody knows about it but me. Jake grabbed a rifle from the wall, checked the chamber. We can hide there until I figure out what to do. Jake. Clara stepped toward him, placed her hand on his arm. What happened to those men? He didn't answer, didn't look at her. Jake. They're dead, Clara. His voice was flat, empty. I killed them. First men I've killed since before the war. She should have been horrified. Should have been afraid of this man who'd just taken 2 lives without hesitation. Instead, she felt something she hadn't expected. Gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. Jake finally looked at her. His eyes were haunted, tortured, but beneath the pain she saw something else. Love. Fierce, protective, undeniable love. I'd do it again, he said quietly. 100 times. 1,000. Whatever it takes to keep you safe. Mama. Lily's small voice cut through the moment. Are the bad men gone? Clara crouched down and pulled her daughter into her arms. They're gone, baby. The bad men are gone. Did Mr. Jake make them go away? Yes, sweetheart. Mr. Jake made them go away. Lily looked up at Jake with those big, trusting eyes. Thank you, Mr. Jake. Jake's expression crumbled. Just for a moment, just a flash of raw emotion before he pulled himself back together. But Clara saw it. Saw the war raging inside him, the guilt and the grief, and the desperate need to protect. We need to go, he said gruffly. Get whatever you can carry. We leave in 5 minutes. They rode through the night, Jake on his horse with Lily tucked against his chest. Clara on the old mare he'd kept in the barn. The wind cut like knives, the cold seeping through their clothes, but nobody complained. Nobody spoke at all. The mining cabin was exactly what Jake had described: small, isolated, half buried in snow. But it had 4 walls and a roof and a fireplace that still worked, and right now that was enough. Jake got the fire going while Clara settled Lily on the narrow cot in the corner. The girl was exhausted, her eyes already drooping, but she fought to stay awake. "Mama, are we going to be okay?" "Yes, baby. We're going to be okay. Promise." Clara stroked her daughter's hair, remembering all the promises she'd made over the years. Promises she couldn't keep, promises that had turned to ash in her mouth. "I promise," she said anyway. Because sometimes hope was all you had. Lily's eyes finally closed. Clara sat beside her for a long moment, watching her breathe, marveling at the fact that this precious, perfect child was still alive, still safe. For now. She found Jake outside, leaning against the cabin wall, staring at nothing. The blood on his shirt had dried to a dark brown stain, and his face was gray with pain. "You need to let me look at that wound." "It can wait." "Jake." "I said it can wait." His voice cracked. I need a minute." "Okay, I just need a minute." Clara understood. She understood better than anyone what it felt like to do something terrible for the right reasons, to cross a line you never thought you'd cross, and wonder if you could ever come back. She didn't push. She just stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, letting him know he wasn't alone. Finally, Jake spoke. "I thought I was done with killing. You were protecting us." "I know. That's what scares me." He turned to look at her, his eyes dark with something that might have been shame. "It was easy, Clara. Too easy. I saw them coming for you, and something in me just switched off. I didn't hesitate. Didn't think. Just pulled the trigger." "That's not a bad thing." "Isn't it?" Jake laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "I used to be a deputy sheriff, did I tell you that, back in Kansas before the war? I believed in law and order, believed that civilized men solved their problems with words, not bullets. That was before. Before what? Before the world taught you different." Jake stared at her. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make everything seem so simple." "It is simple." Clara reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath her fingers. "Good men do terrible things sometimes. That doesn't make them evil. It makes them human." "I don't feel human right now." "Then let me help you remember." She kissed him. Not gentle this time, not tentative. This kiss was fierce and desperate and alive, a declaration and a promise and a challenge all at once. Jake responded in kind. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and for a few precious moments there was nothing in the world but the two of them holding on to each other in the darkness. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Clara," Jake said, his voice rough, "I need you to know something." "What?" "Whatever happens, whatever Silas does, whatever comes next, I'm not letting him take you. You understand, I'll die before I let him touch you again." "Don't say that. It's the truth." "Then make me a different promise." Clara gripped his shirt, pulling him closer. "Promise me you'll live. Promise me you'll fight like hell and come back to me. Promise me you won't give up." "Clara." "Promise me, Jake." He was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "I promise." "Cross your heart." Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been hope. "Cross my heart." 3 days passed in the mining cabin. 3 days of waiting, watching, wondering when Silas would come. Jake spent most of his time outside, keeping watch, checking the perimeter, doing everything he could to prepare for the attack they both knew was coming. His wound was healing, though he still moved like a man held together by sheer stubbornness. Clara stayed with Lily, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She taught her daughter letters, traced them in the frost on the window. She told her stories, the same ones her grandmother had told her when she was small. She held her close at night when the nightmares came. On the 4th morning, Jake came inside with news. "I'm going into town." Clara's blood went cold. What no? That's exactly what Silas wants. I know, but we can't hide up here forever. We're running low on supplies, and Lily needs medicine for that cough. He glanced at the cot where Lily lay sleeping, her breathing raspy and wet. I'll be careful. In and out. Just a few hours. Let me go instead. Absolutely not. Jake. Clara. He crossed to her, took her hands in his. If something happens to me, you take Lily and you run. There's money hidden in the floorboard by the fireplace, enough to get you to California, maybe Oregon. Start over where nobody knows your name. I'm not leaving without you. You will if you have to. For Lily. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to scream and cry and beg him not to go. But she looked at her daughter, at the fever flush on her cheeks and the rattle in her chest, and she knew he was right. Come back to me, she whispered. You promised. I always keep my promises. He kissed her long and deep, like he was memorizing the feel of her lips. Then he pulled away, grabbed his rifle, and walked out the door. Clara watched him right away until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she sat down, put her head in her hands, and prayed. The hours crawled by. Clara paced the small cabin, checking on Lily, adding wood to the fire, looking out the window every few minutes, even though she knew it was too soon for Jake to return. The waiting was agony. The silence was worse. Late afternoon, Lily woke up. Mama, where's Mr. Jake? He went to get you some medicine, sweetheart. He'll be back soon. I miss him. Clara's throat tightened. I know, baby. I miss him too. Mama? Lily's voice was small, hesitant. Is Mr. Jake going to be my new papa? The question hit Clara like a physical blow. She sat down on the edge of the cot, gathering her daughter in her arms. Would you like that? She asked carefully. If Mr. Jake was your papa. Lily nodded against her chest. He's nice. He teaches me things. He doesn't yell like my old papa did. A pause. And he makes you smile. You never used to smile, Mama, but now you do. Clara closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. I smile because of you, baby. And yes, because of Mr. Jake, too. So he can be my papa. We'll see, sweetheart. We'll see. She held Lily until the girl fell asleep again, her small body burning with fever. Clara pressed a cool cloth to her forehead and tried not to think about what would happen if Jake didn't come back. If Silas found him in town. If everything they'd built in these few short weeks came crashing down. The sun was setting when she heard the hoofbeats. Clara grabbed the rifle Jake had left her and moved to the window, heart pounding. One rider. Coming fast. Please, she prayed. Please let it be him. The horse crested the ridge, and Clara's knees nearly buckled with relief. Jake! She threw open the door and ran outside, not caring about the cold, not caring about anything except the man climbing down from his horse. You came back. Told you I would. She threw herself into his arms, and he caught her, held her, buried his face in her hair. I got the medicine, he said against her ear. And something else. What? Jake pulled back, and Clara saw something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Hope. Real, genuine hope. Silas is dead. The words didn't register at first. What? Found him in the alley behind the saloon. Someone stabbed him, robbed him blind. Sheriff said it was probably one of his own men. Turns out Silas owed a lot of people money. Jake shook his head, almost disbelieving. It's over, Clara. It's really over. Clara stared at him. Then she started to laugh, and cry, and laugh some more. It's over. She repeated the words, tasting like freedom. It's really over. It's really over. She kissed him then in the fading light, in the cold mountain air, with the taste of tears on her lips and the weight of years lifting off her shoulders. Inside the cabin, Lily coughed in her sleep. Outside, the sun set on the worst chapter of Clara's life. And somewhere in the darkness, a new story was beginning. The medicine worked faster than Clara had dared to hope. Within 3 days, Lily's fever broke. Within a week she was up and walking, pestering Jake with questions about horses and demanding to know when she could go back to playing with Whiskey the cat. They returned to the ranch on a Sunday morning, the sun bright on the snow, the air crisp and clean. Clara held her breath as they crested the final ridge, half expecting to find the cabin burned to the ground, destroyed by Silas's men in their absence. But there it stood exactly as they'd left it. Solid. Safe. Waiting. "We're home," Lily whispered, her voice full of wonder. Clara looked at Jake. He was staring at the cabin with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Jake, you okay?" "Yeah." He cleared his throat. "Yeah, I never thought I'd hear that word again." "What word?" "Home." Clara reached over and took his hand. Their fingers intertwined, and something settled in her chest. Something that felt like belonging. "Let's go home," she said. The days that followed were gentle ones. Jake threw himself into repairing the damage from the attack, replacing the broken window, fixing the splintered door frame, scrubbing the bloodstains from the porch until no trace remained. Clara understood what he was doing. He was erasing the violence, trying to make the cabin feel safe again. She helped where she could, but mostly she focused on Lily. The child had bounced back remarkably well, as children often do, but Clara caught glimpses of the trauma lurking beneath the surface. Nightmares that sent Lily screaming into wakefulness. Moments of panic when Jake raised his voice or moved too quickly. They were all healing. It would take time. One evening, about 2 weeks after their return, Clara was washing dishes when Jake came up behind her. He didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here?" Clara turned to face him, drying her hands on her apron. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one." Jake's eyes searched her face. "I know this ain't the life you imagined. Stuck in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with a broken-down rancher who talks to his horse more than he talks to people." "Jake, let me finish." He took a breath. "I ain't got much to offer you, Clara. This land, a few head of cattle, a cat with a drinking problem. I can't give you fancy dresses or city life or any of the things a woman like you deserves. A woman like me. Strong, beautiful, brave." His voice dropped. "The kind of woman who should have the world at her feet, not be hiding from it." Clara set down the dish towel. She stepped closer to him, close enough to see the pulse jumping in his throat. "You want to know what I see when I look at you, Jake McAllister?" He didn't answer, just waited. "I see a man who found 2 strangers freezing in a blizzard and carried them to safety. I see a man who gave up his only coat, his only bed, his only peace for people he didn't know. I see a man who killed to protect us, and cried about it afterward because he's got a soul that hasn't hardened past feeling." She reached up and touched his face, her palm against his cheek. "I see a man who lost everything and still had enough love left over to save us." Her voice cracked. "So don't you dare tell me you ain't got much to offer. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, to us." Jake's eyes glistened. "Clara, I love you." The words came out before she could stop them, before she could think about whether it was too soon, too much, too dangerous. They hung in the air between them, fragile and terrifying and true. Jake's breath caught. For one horrible moment Clara thought she'd made a mistake, pushed too far too fast. Then his hands came up to cup her face, gentle as prayer. "Say it again." "I love you." Again. "I love you, Jake. I love you." He kissed her like a drowning man gasping for air, like she was the only solid ground in a world that had been shifting beneath his feet for years. Clara melted into him, her fingers tangling in his hair, her heart pounding against her ribs. When they finally broke apart, both of them were trembling. "I love you too," Jake said hoarsely. "God help me, I love you so much it scares me." "Then we can be scared together." He laughed, a sound so unexpected that it made Clara laugh too. They stood there in the kitchen, foreheads pressed together, laughing like fools, and Clara thought this must be what joy felt like. This lightness, this warmth, this sensation of being exactly where you were meant to be. "Mama." "Mr. Jake, why are you laughing?" Lily stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her nightgown trailing on the floor. "Nothing, sweetheart," Clara said, stepping back from Jake. "We were just being silly. Grown-ups are weird." "You got that right, little one," Jake agreed. He crouched down to Lily's level. "What are you doing out of bed?" "I had a bad dream." "Again?" Lily nodded, her lower lip trembling. "The bad man was chasing us, and you weren't there to make him go away." Jake's expression softened. He opened his arms, and Lily ran into them, burying her face against his shoulder. "Listen to me, Lily. That bad man is never coming back. You understand? He's gone forever, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be right here every single day, keeping you and your mama safe. Promise. Cross my heart." Lily pulled back, studying his face with that solemn intensity only children possess. "Mr. Jake." "Yeah. Can I call you something different?" Jake went still. Clara held her breath. "What do you want to call me, sweetheart?" Lily bit her lip. Her eyes flicked to Clara, then back to Jake. "Mama says maybe one day you could be my papa. Is that true?" Clara's heart stopped. Jake swallowed hard. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Would you want that, for me to be your papa?" "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt. "My other papa was mean. He yelled and threw things and made Mama cry. But you're not like that. You're good. You make Mama smile." Lily. "So, can I call you Papa?" Jake looked up at Clara. She saw everything in his eyes, all the grief and hope and fear and love tangled together into something she didn't have words for. She nodded. Jake turned back to Lily. "Yeah, sweetheart, you can call me Papa." Lily's face split into the widest smile Clara had ever seen. She threw her arms around Jake's neck and squeezed with all her might. "I love you, Papa." Jake's whole body shook. He wrapped his arms around the little girl and held her close, eyes squeezed shut, tears streaming down his face. "I love you too, Lily. More than you'll ever know." Clara watched them, her own tears flowing freely. This was what family looked like. Not blood or obligation or legal documents. Just two people choosing each other, choosing to love, choosing to stay. She'd spent so long searching for home, running from one place to another, hoping the next stop would be different. And here it was. Not a place at all. Just a man holding a child, promising to keep her safe. Home. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted in patches, revealing dead grass and frozen mud. But every day, there was a little more green, a little more life. Jake started talking about planting, about crops and gardens, and all the things that would need doing once the ground thawed. Clara found herself dreaming about the future in ways she never had before. A vegetable garden behind the cabin, a chicken coop that wasn't falling apart. Maybe someday a room added on for Lily so she wouldn't have to share space with her mother forever. Maybe someday a room for a baby. The thought came unbidden, and Clara shoved it away. Too soon. Too much. One step at a time. But she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her chest whenever Jake talked about next year, and when Lily's older, and the future. He was planning. He was hoping. He was building something meant to last. And he wanted her to be part of it. One morning in early March, Clara woke to find Jake already gone. That wasn't unusual. He often rose before dawn to tend the animals, but something felt different today. The cabin was quiet, the fire burned low, and there was a note on the table. "Meet me at the Big Oak. Bring Lily. Jay." Clara frowned. The Big Oak was a 20-minute walk from the cabin, a massive tree at the edge of Jake's property that he'd once told her was older than the nation itself. She had no idea why he'd want to meet there. Lily, sweetheart, wake up. 5 more minutes. Papa wants us to meet him somewhere. We have to go. That got Lily's attention. She scrambled out of bed, suddenly wide awake. Where is it a surprise? I love surprises. I don't know, baby. Let's go find out. They bundled up against the lingering cold and set off through the melting snow. Lily chattered the whole way, her breath puffing white in the morning air, her small hand clutched tight in Clara's. As they approached the big oak, Clara saw Jake standing beneath its branches. He was dressed in his best clothes, the clean shirt, the wool vest, the boots he only wore to church. In his hands, he held something small. "What's going on?" Clara asked as they drew near. Jake didn't answer right away. He looked at her, then at Lily, then back at her again. His expression was strange, almost nervous. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "About what?" "About a lot of things. About my life before you came. About what I want my life to be now." He paused. "About what I want to ask you." Clara's heart began to race. "Jake, let me get this out before I lose my nerve." He took a deep breath. 4 years ago, I buried my wife under this tree. She always loved it here, said it made her feel small in a good way. Like all her problems were tiny compared to something that old and strong. Clara glanced at the ground and noticed for the first time a small stone marker nestled among the roots. Sarah McAllister, beloved wife and mother. "I came here after the fire," Jake continued. "Came here to say goodbye. To tell her I was sorry I couldn't save her. Sorry I couldn't save Emma. Sorry for everything." His voice wavered. "I promised her I'd never love anyone again. That I'd spend the rest of my life making up for failing her." "Jake, you don't have to." "But then I found you." He stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "And Lily. And everything I thought I knew about myself, about what I could feel, about what I deserved. It all changed. You changed it. You changed me." He held up the small object in his hands. It was a ring, Clara realized. Simple brass polished to a shine. "I made this myself," Jake said. "Melted down the casing of the first bullet I ever fired. Back when I was a deputy. Back when I believed in justice and truth and all those things that feel so far away now." He turned the ring over in his fingers. "I've been carrying it around for years, not knowing what I was saving it for. Now I know." He dropped to one knee. "Clara Brennan, I ain't got pretty words. I ain't got money or status or anything most women would want. All I've got is this land, this life, and a heart that's been dead for 4 years until you came along and woke it up." Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at this man kneeling in the melting snow, offering her everything he had. "I love you," Jake said. "I love your strength and your fire and the way you look at me like I'm worth something. I love your daughter like she's my own. I want to spend the rest of my life earning the trust you've given me, being the man you deserve, building something real and good and lasting." He held up the ring. "Will you marry me?" The world went silent. No birds, no wind, no sound at all except the pounding of Clara's heart. She thought about all the reasons she should say no, the speed of it all, the danger of hoping, the risk of giving her heart to another man after the last one had nearly destroyed her. She thought about Thomas, who had promised her the world and delivered only pain, about Silas, who had taught her that trust was a weapon men used against women, about every single person who had ever let her down. Then she thought about Jake, about the way he looked at her in the morning like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe, about the way he held Lily patient and gentle and endlessly kind, about the way he'd killed to protect them and wept about it afterward because he was still soft enough to feel the weight of it. She thought about the cabin, the fire, the cat named Whiskey, the sound of Lily's laughter echoing off the walls. She thought about home. "Yes." The word came out as a whisper, barely audible. Jake's face went slack with disbelief. "What?" "Yes, Louder this time. Yes, I'll marry you. Jake's whole body sagged with relief. He surged to his feet and caught her in his arms, spinning her around, laughing and crying at the same time. She said yes. Lily, did you hear that? She said yes. Lily was jumping up and down, clapping her hands, her face split by the biggest grin Clara had ever seen. Mama's going to marry Papa. Mama's going to marry Papa. Jake set Clara down and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Because it had been, she realized. He'd made it for her. I love you, he said. I love you too. We're going to be a family. We already are. He kissed her then under the big oak tree, with Lily dancing around them and the sun breaking through the clouds above. It was the kind of kiss that felt like a promise, like a vow, like the beginning of something beautiful. When they finally pulled apart, Jake looked down at the grave marker at their feet. Sarah would have liked you, he said quietly. She always said I needed someone to shake me out of my stubbornness. I think she'd be happy, Clara replied, that you found a way to live again. Jake nodded slowly. He crouched down and touched the stone, his fingers tracing the letters of his wife's name. I'll always love you, Sarah, he murmured. But I've got room in my heart for more. I hope you understand. The wind stirred rustling through the branches of the old oak. Clara could have sworn she heard something in it. A whisper. A blessing. A goodbye. Jake stood and took her hand. Let's go home, he said. And they did. The wedding was set for April, when the wildflowers would be blooming and the roads would be clear enough for the handful of neighbors Jake wanted to invite. Clara protested that she didn't need anything fancy, but Jake insisted. You deserve a real wedding, he said, with flowers and music and people who care about you. I already have everything I need. Then let me give you more. So Clara relented. She let Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house help her alter an old dress. She let Jake's neighbor, old Mr. Hensley, tune up his fiddle for the ceremony. She let Lily pick wildflowers from the meadow, practicing her role as flower girl until she had it memorized. And through it all, she felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Joy. Pure, uncompromised joy. The night before the wedding, Clara sat by the fire, unable to sleep. Her dress hung on the back of the door, freshly pressed. Lily was snoring softly in her bed. Everything was peaceful, perfect, ready. So why did she feel so terrified? Can't sleep either. Jake's voice came from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, arms crossed, watching her. No. You. Not a chance. He crossed to sit beside her, taking her hand. What's on your mind? I'm scared. Of what? Of everything. Of being happy. Of losing this. She gestured around the cabin. Every good thing I've ever had has been taken from me. What if this is the same? Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he squeezed her hand. You know what I've learned these past few months? What? That you can't protect yourself from loss by refusing to love. All you do is lose twice. Once when you push people away, and again when you realize what you missed. He turned to face her. I spent 4 years trying to feel nothing, and it didn't make the pain go away. It just made me empty. I know, I did the same thing. So let's do something different. Let's love each other anyway. Let's be happy anyway. And if the worst happens, he paused. Well, at least we'll have had this. Clara looked at him, this man who had found her in a blizzard and carried her to safety. This man who had killed for her and cried for her and asked her to be his wife. I'm going to spend the rest of my life loving you, Jake McAllister. Promise. Cross my heart. He smiled that rare, beautiful smile that transformed his whole face. Then I reckon we'll be all right. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Tomorrow, they would be married. Tonight, they were already home. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Clara woke to the sound of birdsong, the first she'd heard since winter began. She lay still for a moment, letting the reality sink in. Today was the day. After everything she'd been through, after all the pain and fear and running today, she would become someone's wife again. But this time, it would be different. This time, she was choosing. "Mama? Mama, wake up! It's wedding day!" Lily burst through the door, already dressed in the little white frock Mrs. Patterson had sewn for her. Her dark hair was brushed and ribboned, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "I'm awake, baby." "Papa says you're not allowed to see him until the ceremony. He says it's bad luck." Lily climbed onto the bed, bouncing. "Is that true? Is it really bad luck?" "Some people believe so." "That's silly. How can seeing someone be bad luck?" Clara laughed and pulled her daughter close. "I don't know, sweetheart, but let's not take any chances, okay?" "Okay." Lily snuggled against her. "Mama." "Yes." "Are you happy?" Clara thought about the question. Really thought about it. A year ago, happiness had seemed like something that happened to other people. A distant concept like snow in summer or stars you could touch. Now it was here, real and warm and breathing in her arms. "Yes, Lily, I'm happy." "Good, because Papa's happy too. He was singing this morning. I heard him." "Singing?" "That funny song. The one in the language I don't understand." "The Cherokee Lullaby." Jake only sang it when he was feeling something too big for words. Clara's heart swelled. "Come on," she said, sitting up. "Let's get me ready to marry your papa." The ceremony was held in the meadow behind the cabin, where the wildflowers had begun to bloom in patches of purple and yellow. Jake had built an arbor from branches of the old oak tree, woven with ribbons that Lily had insisted on. "It needs to be pretty, Papa. Mama deserves pretty." Jake had agreed without argument. The guests were few, but genuine. Mrs. Patterson from town, who had helped Clara with her dress. Old Mr. Hensley with his fiddle. The Rawlings family from the neighboring ranch, whose wife had brought a pie that smelled like heaven. Even the sheriff had come hat in hand to pay his respects. Clara barely noticed any of them. All she could see was Jake. He stood under the arbor wearing a black suit she'd never seen before. His hair was combed back, his boots polished, his face freshly shaved. He looked younger somehow, the lines of grief softened by something that might have been joy. When he saw her walking toward him, his whole expression changed. His eyes went wide, then soft, then wet with tears he didn't try to hide. "My God," he breathed. "Clara." She wore the simple white dress Mrs. Patterson had helped her alter, nothing fancy, just clean cotton, with a bit of lace at the collar. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, the way Jake liked it. In her hands, she carried a bouquet of wildflowers Lily had picked that morning. "You look beautiful," Jake said as she reached him. "You look pretty good yourself." He laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise even him. "I can't believe this is real." "It's real." Clara took his hands. "It's real, and I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." The preacher, a circuit rider who happened to be passing through, cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The vows were simple. Jake went first, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Clara, I spent 4 years believing my life was over. I buried my heart with my wife and daughter, and I swore I'd never dig it up again. Then I found you freezing in that snowstorm, and something inside me woke up." He squeezed her hands. "I can't promise you an easy life. This land is hard, and the winters are harsh, and there will be days when nothing goes right. But I can promise you this: I will stand beside you through all of it. I will protect you with everything I have. I will love you every single day for the rest of my life. And when my days are done, I'll die knowing I spent them with the woman who saved me." Clara's tears spilled over. She didn't wipe them away. "Jake, when I met you, I had given up on men, on trust, on love, on everything. I thought the best I could hope for was survival, just getting through each day without being hurt again. Her voice cracked. "But you showed me something different. You showed me that kindness still exists. That there are people who give without expecting anything in return. That love doesn't have to hurt." She looked into his eyes, gray-blue like storm clouds, but warm now. So warm. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of it. I promise to love you, support you, stand by you no matter what comes. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your family." She smiled through her tears. "I promise to be your home." The preacher nodded solemnly. "Do you, Jacob McAllister, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Clara Brennan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." The preacher smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Jake cupped her face in his hands, gentle as always, and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, and when they pulled apart, Clara saw that his cheeks were as wet as hers. "I love you, Mrs. McAllister." "I love you too, Mr. McAllister." "We're married now," Lily shouted, throwing her flowers in the air. "We're a real family." Everyone laughed. Jake scooped Lily up with one arm and pulled Clara close with the other, holding them both against his chest. "Yeah, little one," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're a real family now." The celebration lasted well into the evening. Mr. Hensley played his fiddle until his fingers were sore. Mrs. Rawlings' pie disappeared within an hour. Someone had brought whiskey, and even Clara allowed herself a small glass, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. But the moment she treasured most came later, after the guests had gone, and Lily had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from dancing and eating and sheer joy. Jake found Clara standing on the porch, looking up at the stars. "Penny, for your thoughts. I was just thinking about how much has changed." Clara leaned into him as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "A few months ago, I was sure I was going to die in that blizzard. Now I'm married. I have a home. My daughter calls someone Papa." "Regrets?" "Not a single one." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. The night was cold, but clear, the kind of cold that felt clean rather than cruel. "Can I tell you something?" Jake asked quietly. "Anything." "When I found you in that snow, when I saw Lily standing there barefoot screaming at the sky, something happened to me, something I can't explain." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "What do you mean?" "I heard a voice. In my head. Clear as day." Jake's expression was troubled, like he was admitting something he'd never told anyone. It said, "These are yours now. Take care of them." A voice. I know how it sounds. Believe me, I've spent months trying to talk myself out of it. But I heard it, Clara. Plain as I'm hearing you now. Clara thought about the wind in the oak tree, the whisper she'd heard when Jake was talking to Sarah's grave, the sense that something larger than themselves had brought them together. "Maybe it was God," she said softly, "or fate, or your wife looking out for you from wherever she is. You don't think I'm crazy. I think there are things in this world we don't understand." Clara reached up to touch his face. "And I think whatever brought us together, whatever led you to that snowstorm on that exact day, at that exact moment, I'm grateful for it. I don't need to understand it. I just need to honor it." Jake's eyes shone. "How did I get so lucky?" "We got lucky together." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Come to bed, wife." Clara smiled. "Yes, husband." The months that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. Spring melted into summer, and the ranch came alive with growth. Jake planted a vegetable garden, and Clara tended it with care she hadn't known she possessed. Lily adopted a baby chick that followed her everywhere, much to Whiskey, the cat's disgust. They fell into a rhythm, the three of them. Mornings began early with chores and coffee and quiet conversation. Afternoons were for work for teaching Lily her letters for the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. Evenings were for each other gathered around the fire, telling stories and making plans. It wasn't perfect. They fought sometimes about small things that didn't matter and big things that did. Jake had a stubborn streak that drove Clara crazy, and Clara had a temper that could flare without warning. There were hard days when the old grief crept back, days when Clara found Jake staring at nothing, lost in memories she couldn't reach. But they worked through it, every time, because that was what family did. One evening in late August, Clara sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Lily was inside, supposedly doing her reading, but probably playing with the cat. Jake was in the barn, finishing up the day's work. Clara's hand rested on her stomach. She'd suspected for weeks now. The tiredness, the nausea, the way her body felt different, fuller somehow. But she hadn't said anything to Jake. Hadn't wanted to get his hopes up until she was sure. Now she was sure. "You look like you've got something on your mind." Jake had emerged from the barn without her noticing. He walked toward her, wiping his hands on a rag, his face curious. "Come sit with me." He settled beside her on the porch step, close enough that their shoulders touched. "What's going on, Clara?" "I have something to tell you." "Okay." Clara took a deep breath. "Do you remember a few months ago when you talked about the future? About building more rooms onto the cabin? About Lily getting bigger? About all the things we might do someday?" "I remember." "Well," Clara took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "Someday might be coming sooner than we thought." Jake went very still. His hand pressed against her belly, his eyes searching her face. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm pregnant, Jake. We're going to have a baby." For a long moment, he didn't speak. His expression was unreadable, and Clara felt a flutter of fear. What if he wasn't ready? What if this was too much, too fast? Then Jake's face crumpled. He pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe, his whole body shaking with silent sobs. Clara held him back, stroking his hair, letting him feel whatever he needed to feel. "A baby," he finally managed. "We're having a baby." "Yes. I'm going to be a father again." "Yes, Jake, you're going to be a father again." He pulled back to look at her, his cheeks wet, his eyes red, and in his face Clara saw everything: the grief of what he'd lost, the joy of what he'd found, the hope of what was coming. "I love you," he said. "I love you so much." "I love you too. I'm going to do better this time. I'm going to be there for every moment. I'm not going to miss a single thing." "I know you won't." "Papa, Mama, why are you crying?" Lily stood in the doorway, her face concerned. She clutched her reading primer in one hand, the other resting on Whiskey's head. Jake wiped his eyes and opened his arms. "Come here, sweetheart." Lily ran to them, climbing into Jake's lap. "We have some news," Clara said. "Good news or bad news?" "Very good news." Clara looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. "You're going to be a big sister, Lily. Mama's having a baby." Lily's eyes went wide. Her mouth fell open. For a moment she looked like she might cry. Then she let out a shriek of joy so loud it startled Whiskey into fleeing. "A baby! We're having a baby!" She threw her arms around Clara's neck, then Jake's, then Clara's, again bouncing with excitement. "Can I name it? Can I teach it to ride horses? Can it sleep in my room? When is it coming? Is it a boy or a girl?" Clara laughed, overwhelmed by the barrage of questions. "Slow down, sweetheart. We don't know if it's a boy or girl yet, and it won't be here for several months. But it's really real. We're really having a baby. We're really having a baby." Lily's face split into the biggest smile Clara had ever seen. "This is the best day ever. First I got a papa, and now I'm getting a brother or sister. Our family keeps getting bigger. Jake hugged her tight. "That's right, little one. Our family keeps getting bigger." Clara watched them, her husband and her daughter wrapped up together in a moment of pure happiness. She thought about the blizzard, about the wagon train that had thrown them out to die, about Silas Crawford and Thomas Brennan, and all the people who had tried to break her. They hadn't won. None of them had won. Because here she was surrounded by love, carrying new life inside her, living proof that the darkest chapter didn't have to be the last one. The baby was born in March, when the snow was just beginning to melt. A boy. 7 pounds, strong lungs, a shock of dark hair like his mother's. They named him Samuel. Samuel Jacob McAllister. "After my father," Jake explained, holding his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face. "He wasn't a good man, but my mother always said there was something worth saving in him. Maybe this little one can be what he couldn't." Clara watched her husband cradle their son, watched Lily peer over his shoulder with wonder in her eyes. "He's so small," Lily whispered. "Was I that small once?" "Even smaller," Clara said. "Wow." Lily reached out one careful finger and touched Samuel's hand. The baby's fingers curled around hers instinctively. "He's holding my hand. Mama, look, Papa. He's holding my hand." "He knows his big sister already," Jake said. That night, after Samuel had been fed and changed and settled into the cradle Jake had built, Clara found herself unable to sleep. She sat by the fire watching the flames, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Jake came to sit beside her. "You okay?" "More than okay." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I keep waiting to wake up, waiting for all of this to disappear." "It's not going to disappear." "I know, but sometimes I still can't believe it's real." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. "I found this in the snow the day I found you," he said. It was clutched in Lily's hand. "I kept meaning to give it back, but then, I don't know. It felt important somehow." He opened his palm. In it lay a small silver button tarnished with age. Clara's breath caught. "That was my father's," she whispered. "He gave it to Lily before he died, told her it would keep her safe." "I think it did." Jake pressed the button into her hand. "I think it led me to you." Clara closed her fingers around the little piece of silver, feeling its weight, its history. "Maybe it did," she said. "Or maybe we were always meant to find each other. Either way, I'm grateful. So am I." They sat together in the firelight, listening to Samuel's soft breathing, to Lily's occasional murmur from the bedroom, to the wind whispering through the eaves. "Jake, yeah, thank you." "For what?" "For saving us, for loving us, for giving us a home." Jake kissed her temple. "You saved me too, Clara. Don't forget that. Before you came, I was just waiting to die. Now I've got something to live for. A family. A future." He pulled her closer. "We saved each other." Clara smiled against his shoulder. Outside, the last of winter was giving way to spring. Inside, a fire burned warm and steady, chasing away the shadows. And in a small cabin in the Colorado wilderness, a family slept peacefully, safe and whole and together. They had been strangers once, broken people thrown together by a storm. Now they were home. Clara woke before dawn the next morning, as she always did. But instead of rising immediately, she lay still for a moment, listening. Jake's steady breathing beside her, Samuel's soft whimpers from the cradle, Lily's footsteps padding across the floor, trying to be quiet as she went to check on her baby brother, the sounds of her family, the sounds of her life. She thought about writing it down someday. The whole story from the beginning. The blizzard, the rescue, the healing, the fear and the hope and the love that had grown between them like wildflowers after rain. Maybe Lily would read it when she was older. Maybe Samuel would. Maybe their children would, and their children's children, passing the story down through generations like a treasured heirloom. The story of how a broken man found two strangers in the snow, how he brought them home, how they became a family, How love, even after loss, could bloom again. Clara rose quietly, careful not to wake Jake. She crossed to the window and looked out at the mountains pink with the first light of dawn. She was Clara McAllister now. Wife, mother, survivor. She had been sold, abandoned, left for dead. She had walked through fire and ice and come out the other side. And she was still standing. Behind her, Samuel began to cry. Jake stirred, reaching instinctively for the cradle. Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Is Sammy hungry, Mama?" "Probably, sweetheart." "I'll get his blanket." Clara turned from the window and walked toward her family. Jake caught her eye and smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that still made her heart skip after all these months. "Good morning, Mrs. McAllister." "Good morning, Mr. McAllister." She took her son in her arms. She felt her daughter press against her side. She met her husband's eyes across the room. This was her life now. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And it was more than she had ever dared to dream. The story of Clara and Jake McAllister would be told for years to come. Around campfires and dinner tables, in letters and journals passed from one generation to the next. The story of a little girl who stood barefoot in a blizzard crying for someone to save her mother. The story of a rancher who had nothing left to lose but found something worth living for. The story of two broken people who built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Some called it luck. Some called it fate. Some called it a miracle. Clara called it love. And love, she had learned, was the strongest force in the world. Stronger than fear, stronger than grief, stronger than all the darkness that tried to swallow you whole. Love had found her in the snow. Love had carried her home. And love would keep her there, warm and safe and whole, for the rest of her days. Home was not just a place. It was the people who stayed when everyone else walked away. It was the hands that reached for you in the darkness. It was the voice that whispered, "I've got you," and meant it with every fiber of their being. Clara had searched her whole life for home. She had finally found it. Not in a cabin in the mountains. Not in Colorado or Arizona or anywhere on a map. Home was Jake's arms around her. Home was Lily's laughter. Home was Samuel's tiny fingers wrapped around hers. Home was love, fierce and tender and unbreakable. And Clara McAllister was never letting go.